Sue Whiting is a children's and young adult author, and she's also an editor. She worked in publishing for 2 decades before she decided to become a full-time writer, a freelance editor, and a writing coach. But she is flat out. She's just had 2 new books come out, and we're going to talk about those, as well as her career and how she got to where she is today. Sue Whiting, hello, how are you?
Hi, Sue. How are you?
I'm
Thanks for having me.
It's absolutely delightful to have you. Now, I know we followed a very similar path in our writing in that we were both teachers. What took you from teaching to writing?
Oh, I think it was unexpected. I can say that up front because I'd never really thought about writing prior to teaching, and it was really that first up when I started teaching. I fell in love with children's books as a teacher, and that was my start. And um, in the early days, I did some further study, and part of that further study was teaching, was literacy teaching basically. And I took some courses in children's literature because of my interest, and I had to write a children's book for um, for that course. And that was the moment where my life changed, really. I went from someone who had no interest in writing to someone who desperately wanted to be a writer. And it took me another 10 years before I acted upon that, because I didn't feel like I was a writer. I didn't have the right to even think about that, or the ability. But so I was really teaching and children's books that took me into writing, and then writing took me into editing and so forth.
Mm. And so it was the writing that came first and the editing came second?
That's right, yes. So the editing was by supreme accident. I was just following a lead, and it's a long, boring story, but I ended up going to a very small local publisher that was just starting up with a manuscript, hoping that they might publish it, and I ended up with the job as the editor of their children's list. So that's the short version. That small company went broke twice, and it was, there's lots. It was a very traumatic kind of time, really, but it actually was amazing because that experience is what led me to get the job at Walker Books, and that's where I spent 10 years there, as editor. So that was the sort of the stepping stone into that job. So that was something unexpected, and that's when I left teaching, actually, to take that job at Walker Books.
So with Walker Books, I always found it hard to write when I was teaching full time. I just found I'd come home and not have the energy for it. When you're editing other people's books and doing everything that comes with that, and it's not just reading books and commenting on them, there's much more to it than that. How do you find the energy to do your own writing?
Well, that's probably why I'm not there any longer. So that's a really interesting question, because when I first started at Walker Books, I was determined that I would continue writing. And a few people said to me when I took the job that wasn't going to be possible. And for a while, it was possible, but it was exhausting. So it was very much having to find a way in, and every book was different. And so, yes, writing was on the weekends, or it was, for one book, Portraits of Selena, I wrote on a train going into the office every morning, 20 minutes. Like, the train trip was a lot longer than that, but there was a 20-minute window and there wasn't many people on my carriage, where I wrote every day. And that's how I wrote that, just about that whole novel. But I got to, after, I think, as the job got more and more involved, and I had more responsibility, more pressure probably, and I was just getting very tired. And that was one of the reasons that I left Walker Books, was that I found that I didn't have the creative energy any longer to be able to write my own books and work and do my job at Walker Books.
So to go from writing to editing, how much was that also a learning process for your own writing? How did that influence what you do as a writer?
Enormously. And I often wonder where I'd be as a writer if I didn't take that step. So when the opportunity came to take up editing and to follow that as a career path, it wasn't my chosen career path. I ended up loving it, and I still work in that job now, but it wasn't my chosen career path. But I was at the very early stages of my career, and I thought, anything that I can do that I can learn more about the craft of writing is going to to help me as a writer. And so that was my motivation for doing it, really. I just thought it was going to further my ability to be able to write well, the more I understood the whole process. And so I think by, over the years, the things that I learned, I suppose, about marketing and about the publishing process were all informative. But just when you're delving into other people's stories day in and day out and trying to find what makes them work and where they need to improve, and just being immersed. It's just like when you're teaching kids to read, that immersion in it. I learned so much, and I'm very confident that I'm a much better writer because of being an editor. But of course, I also have to turn off that internal editor. It's not very good to the creative process. You get nowhere if you listen to that editor always telling you that it's not good enough. But I think it has definitely improved my ability as a writer.
I find that really interesting, actually, with your experience as an editor and such a beautiful writer, and we'll talk about Chance in a minute, that you still have that picky voice in the head. How do you turn it off? How do you get past that?
Oh, look, I don't really know. It's a conscious effort of turning off that. I remember meeting Mal Peet a number of times at Walker Books, and he always talked about, he's an English author, if you're not aware of his work, he passed away a few years ago, sadly, but he used to talk about having a cranky parrot on his shoulder that went, "You're crap, you're crap, you're crap." You're terrible, you can't write. And so I have, so I often imagine that cranky parrot, and then you have to sort of tell that cranky parrot to be quiet. So it's really, I think it's just switching it off and trusting yourself. I'm a big believer of morning pages. So particularly when I'm writing a book, I always start the morning with that free writing. And I think that really helps a lot to get the flow going and to not listen to that cranky parrot. And I think that really helps more than anything else when I'm writing. If I'm not doing those morning pages, it's much harder to turn that editor off, or otherwise I'll be just working on the first chapter forever. Making it better, and I'll just have another go at it.
Yeah, I can spend all day on the line and then go, "Oh, good day."
Particularly with picture books.
Well, let's talk about that, because at the moment you have the Book of Chance out, and also Good Question, which is a tale told backwards. Pardon me showing it to everybody. Sue, how hard is it to go from writing a middle grade young adult novel to a picture book?
Look, they're obviously very different types of books and involve different skills. And it's really just following the ideas, because I suppose I've been working as a teacher, but also as an editor in both, through picture books right up to young adult as an editor. I'm used to switching in and out of the two, and it's really just where the idea takes me. And sometimes, though, if I've been writing a young adult novel or a fiction of some sort, and then I want to write a picture book, and I'm sort of at this point now, I've got this picture book idea sort of in my brain, and I'm not quite sure if it's going to work. But sometimes, I do go back to my, as you can see behind me, I have lots of books, go back to my shelf and pull out my favorite picture books and read them and type them in, and just to get back into that, into the flow and language and rhythm of picture books and saying things very concisely. But I think it's sort of, after you've read 3 million picture books, I think they're just very sort of inside you, and you can just sort of tap into it pretty easily.
Do you find, because you've read so many, because this is something I found when I was teaching, that you read so many to the kids and you work on so many, and then in your work you read so many, sometimes you start a book and go, hold on, am I just rewriting something I've read?
I have worried about that. There have been times that I can remember one time a while back, I wrote a paragraph and I thought, have I read this? And there was particularly, I was naming this nursing home or aged care facility or something. I can't even remember the story, but I can remember the name of it. I thought, I think I've read this somewhere before. And I went through all these different books I thought I might have got it from, because you do worry that, you know, you're going to pinch something inadvertently, but I could never find it. So I don't know if I had or not. But yeah, I have had that feeling. And there have been times, particularly when I was an editor, I can remember a couple of times when I've read a manuscript and then I've been talking to and I know it's very similar to something that I have written, not that necessarily the whole manuscript, but maybe an image or something that happens. And I've always sort of said out to the authors, now, ever this, you know, I just wanted to let you know that I have written something similar to this little bit here. If ever you see it, I haven't pinched it because I sort of feel worried that people think that. But nearly every time when that has happened, when I've gone back to my own manuscript, I have felt compelled to change it or take it out, because I've read it somewhere else. So, you know, and it's, you know, as most things, you can murder most of your darlings and that's okay. But I think it's pretty common. And I've read lots of manuscripts where I've thought this is so similar to something, to a really well-known book. And I'm sure most times the author has done that very accidentally. We sort of immerse all those, you know, patterns and ideas and imagery.
When you sit down to write, do you know it's going to be a picture book or a middle grade? Do you have that? Do you know exactly where you're going?
Sometimes, not always. And different books, I'm just trying to think. The book, I've just had another novel accepted by Walker Books, and that one actually started out as a picture book character, and the picture book wasn't working for various reasons, and then it's those characters I've sort of put into this other idea, and it's become a novel. So sometimes you think it's going to be a picture book and it ends up something bigger, or sometimes you think it's going to be, you know, a chapter book and it ends up something smaller. The middle grade, like Missing and The Book of Chance, I pretty much was quite targeted that it was going to be for that age group, that sort of 10 to 14. With Missing, I wasn't quite sure at first, but I was sort of hoping that's where I was going to fit. But the others, you know, you don't really know where an idea is going to take you. Sometimes you think you have a fabulous picture book idea, but it's too big for a picture book.
Congratulations, by the way. I didn't want to stop you with, oh, that's great, in the middle of your chat there. That's with the new contract. That's fantastic. So are you a planner? Do you like look into characters and all that, or do you just sit down and go for it?
I'm not a planner in that I don't write. I write big outlines, you know, chapter by chapter, like some authors do. I think I actually did that for Missing while I was still working at Walker Books, because I thought maybe that would be a way to get me to write when I was struggling, trying to work out how I was going to do both. I realised when I left Walker Books and wrote Missing that I had forgotten I'd written the outline, and I went back to it at the end and went, oh, I wonder what I said. And, you know, it was, you know, I'd stuck to it pretty much, but mostly I don't. So what I tend to do is I like to have a really good idea of the underlying story that I'm trying to tell, and not the premise. The main characters, I do spend quite a bit of time on the main characters and thinking about them and what makes them unique and what they want and need. And I like to know a few key scenes and how it's going to end. So sometimes it ends in a different way, but and for Missing in particular, I had about 3 different endings. If I wasn't brave enough to have this ending, I was going to have this ending, and then sort of, because it was, you know, quite a traumatic story, that one. So I like to know where I'm going, and even though I'm open to change that if something better comes up, and but I think that gives my writing more focus. So.
In listening to you, Sue, there's one word that pops into my head about your approach to writing, is that willingness to be flexible, to go, not to be dogged and go, this is going to be a picture book. You're very, and I've done that.
That's what I have to say.
But you're very, okay, where's this going to lead me? You almost let the story lead. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, possibly. I haven't thought about it that way. I know that a lot of people talk that I'm flexible because I write, you know, different genres and different age groups, and not sort of target one particular age group. But yes, I think maybe it's because I never really know what I'm doing. going to take me, and I'll just let it lead me. But and also it's a bit of determination too. If you've got an idea, if it doesn't work in one form, you know, I want to take it. If I'm fond of that character or that idea, I try to find a way to make it work. So maybe that's it. I don't know.
Let's talk characters. The Missing I absolutely love, so I couldn't wait to get my hands on Chance. Chance is like the main character in Missing. She's just a great character. She's strong, she's feisty, but she's vulnerable. How much time do you spend with them, getting to know them? I know you said it, you know, it's important to you.
A long time. Chance was a kind of a tricky character to write in some ways because she's very forthright, and she, you know, she knows her own mind for a young person, and she's very black and white. And I'm not like that at all. I'm a fence sitter. I can see all sides. But I thought that was really important to have her like that in this particular story, and the things, what she had to contend with, it made her problems even worse because of the type of person that she was, because truth was so important to her. And so in some ways, I think as a young teen that, you know, will speak her mind and say things that, you know, tell people what she thinks, could come across as a bit of a prickly character. So I had to sort of try to find a way to make her vulnerable, and to tell the story in a way so that the readers will empathise with her first up. But I do spend a lot of time journaling in my character's voice. I've been doing, in the background, I've been writing a historic novel with a character called Matilda, and I spend a lot of time. I feel like I'm just going to be spending my whole life doing journals for Matilda, and one without ever writing her book because I'm a bit scared of it, I think. But I do find that really helpful. So I do spend a lot of time journaling and putting that character just in all different situations and seeing how they react and what they say about it, and get to know them that way. So character is really important to me, and particularly knowing what drives them and what you know, what their backstory is, even though it's not part of the story, but to know what they bring to the table, I suppose, in this particular, whatever particular book it is.
And the book that's just been accepted, is that another middle grade? Is that another feisty girl character?
It's another girl character, and it's a bit younger, and so it's very different to Missing and the Book of Chance. It still has a mystery, and it's probably more mystery adventure with a bit of fantasy even in it.
Oh.
So yes, so this character is actually a bit of a warrior, but she's also very strong, and she's, you know, she might think she's, you know, a warrior, but she gets the job done.
And when's that likely to come out?
Well, we've done it. This is all very new, so we're just. I think it's at the moment sort of 2022, but you know, still haven't signed on the dotted line, but I know it's all in hand somewhere.
And I think that's really important for people to realise. It isn't you finish a book, oh, it's coming out in 2 months. It's a process, and it is a long wait till it comes out.
It is, and this book, you know, I know needs a lot more work. I know it needs a lot more work, and so I'm sure that the editors will know it needs an even more than I realise amount of work. So there's still work to be done on the book, you know, even once you get it accepted.
So as a young writer, or as a young reader, what sort of books influenced you? What did you like reading?
Well, you know, I'm going to show my age here, and the era that I grew up in. Of course, it was Famous Five by Enid Blyton. She was the one that turned me into a reader. And if I, you know, point over there in my bookshelf, I can show you the original red hardback copies of them there. So, and it's interesting, you know, that those mystery stories were the stories that I was really drawn to as a child, and now I've sort of come full circle, and they're the stories that I'm drawn to write, which is supposed to be expected in some ways, but it is interesting that they've influenced me not only just to becoming a reader, but also the types of stories I like to read as an adult and to write.
It's interesting you say Enid Blyton, because when you talked about that new book with the element of fantasy, it just popped into my head. I thought, oh, sounds in a good way, not the bad, you know, lashings of cream and.
No lashings of cream. So, but there's a few. few animals that do things that animals don't normally do.
Oh, good. Sounds fantastic. So for young people, when they say to you, I don't like reading, I don't want to read, have you got favourite books that you point them in the direction of?
I think it really depends on the young person. And what I usually say, it's usually parents who are the ones that are asking you those questions rather than the kids. And I usually say, you just have to find the right book. And I think, and once you find that book, and that's it. So Enid Blyton was that book for me, and that's what started me on my reading journey. And as a teacher, I used to teach a lot of kids with learning difficulties and lots of different reading programs, and it was all about finding that right book. And I think often you need to trust the kids to help you to find that, because they'll be the one. And sometimes it's not the book that you think. And I know with my son, when he was like, he's in his 30s now, but when he was a young reader, he struggled for a while in the early years. And it wasn't, and I was, a literacy teacher, and I loved writing, and so he always had books read to him, but he lacked confidence. And it wasn't until he came home with a book that was a book I would never have picked for him. Like, I tried all the ones that you normally would with a young boy, trying to get them to read, but it was a book that was much more deep and meaningful. And that was the book that sent him on a path of reading, and he never looked back. So it's really just finding that one book. And I think you have to trust the kids sometimes to, can guide them, but to find their own book that's going to be the one.
Mm. And I think we do that a lot. We think just because I think it's a great book doesn't mean they're going to. How often have you forced a book on a child and they go, oh, I can't do it?
My own children all the time, when they were kids. You're going to love this book. You're going to love this book. Yes. But I think for those reluctant readers, you never know which one's going to just speak to them. You don't really know what's going on in their heads.
No, exactly. I made my daughter read Anne Frank, and she came in and said, what did you make me read that for?
That's right. Yes.
She was devastated, the tears. So what about to new writers? What books? I know we've got to read lots, but if you could pick out a couple of books that you go, that is my ideal book. For me, it's Our Babies. I love Our Babies. What would be your...
I love Our Babies too.
It's beautiful.
Well, I think with fiction, like one of my, I think the most beautifully crafted books is Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. And when I was an editor, I used to get all my editors at Walker Books to read that book, because I think that it, it's so, I cry every time I even think about it. But I think it's beautifully crafted and beautifully told, and I think that is one to really look at and examine. There's so many different. Again, it depends on what genre they want to read, but I think reading widely. But that's the one that I used to always sort of come back to as the book that sort of benchmark for me. One day.
Now, and the other thing, the other thing with that book too, the audio version is Jason Isaac, I think his name is, in balding, beautiful voice, British actor. Oh man, after I'd read it, I thought I just want to listen to it again. I'd just be walking along going, oh wow, it's beautiful.
Wow. Well, I'm just looking up on my shelf up there, which is where I have my favourite books, and I have 3 editions of it up there already. I have when I left Walker Books, they knew I loved it so much, they gave me a print of the because it was published by Walker UK, of the cover. So that's sort of on the wall there. And now I need to go and get the audio version so that I can listen to it too. I didn't like the movie though.
No, I didn't even bother. Didn't even bother with the movie. Actually, I think the only movie, or one of the few movies I've liked as an adaptation, probably better than the book, was The Dressmaker.
Oh, yes. Yeah. No, I think you're probably right there. Yeah. Well, they're at least equal. They're both, interesting interpretations of that story.
Exactly.
But
just less bleak, the film, and it had a Hemsworth, so that's always good.
It was sort of quirky, very quirky.
Yeah, it really was. It was great. See, I told you we talk about anything. I just never know. So it's been so lovely to talk to you and hear about how you write and what you write. Congratulations on the Book of Chance, and also Good Question and Tale Told Backwards. They're both absolutely beautiful books. May they live long and go far, and congratulations on the new contract.
Oh, thank you very much. And thanks for the chat. It's been lovely.
Pleasure.